maybe the founders or the CEOs that are listening, or maybe they're, you know, maybe they're an entry-level employee or you know, middle management, but they, you know, they want to have an impact and they're thinking about how do they do that in their context. So you've clearly spent a lot of time doing cross-domain work and translation. And one of the things that stood out to me is we spent a lot of time talking about translating values, right? These are what corporates want. This is what the research team wants, etc. But we also spent some time talking about incentive structures, right? Like if we can align incentive structures, even at the macro scale of like economics, then maybe we can move this thing forward a little bit faster. So in your space and in your experience, maybe for someone who's out there listening and they're saying, I really want to have an impact and I'm stuck at this messy intersection with a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different priorities, but I see myself as the one in the middle who might be able to kind of like, you know, unlock the gridlock. Do you have any frameworks, or do you have any advice for someone who's kind of sitting in that space, who's kind of straddling the fence between internal strategy, sales, operations, and then like external product market fit? How do we make this thing go? In your experience, you know, and you in startup culture for a few years now, or even back at Truterra, like, are there any kind of things that you go back to, tools or frameworks that you revisit when you're like, I've got these different stakeholders with competing priorities, and I've got to find a way to put them together in a way that the puzzle pieces kind of fit to take the next step?
Yeah. That was a hard question.
I don't.
Yeah.
You're constantly pulling me back down.
That's good. Yeah. I had one direction to go with that, and then round out the question. It's like, yeah, I don't know of any clean, easy framework for any of that. A lot of it is just, to me, experimentation with the different frameworks that can put the pieces together, and then just like first level curiosity and empathy. Like really sit for a minute, and number one, you need to know who your stakeholders are and what their role is. That's a starting place that a lot of people skip past, right?
Interesting.
And I've been guilty of that, right? Like our primary point of contact is, they're the sustainability leader, that they run these programs. Cool. Did you ask the question, are you in a position to make a decision on how budgets get allocated for this work? Because you can be the best of friends with that person. They can be all in. And they go, great, I'm going to take this up the chain. Dead. Oh, I didn't know who all my stakeholders were.
Right.
So I guess that's a framework starting point. Know who all your relevant stakeholders are. And then it's just like, take a minute and find a version of empathy for like, how's that stakeholder, like what are they facing? What's their life? What are they doing to make decisions? And if you can't find that empathy, talk to somebody who knows that role. Talk to somebody at a different company who's in that role. Like you can't know all of them, but you can get a pretty good idea, and then you go, oh yeah, well that argument that works on this stakeholder definitely won't work on that one. But to your point then on aligned incentives, as you start to empathize across the stakeholders, then it actually goes back to one of the most important skills for CEO, porposing, right? Or like climbing the tree, right? Whatever you want to call it. But you kind of got to go deep and high. You know? And with that, it's like, okay, a little bit higher, stakeholders, cool. What's it about for you? Okay, now I know what it's all about. Okay, system. How does that fit together? What's the thing that pulls these things together? And then test. But like putting that into specific terms, and I was appreciative of the way that you framed the question. Said I was going to go micro on this whole problem solving with kind of the translating of the work, and we talked kind of micro internally translating, corporate decision maker to technical product. But now we go macro to what you're saying, and now applied to our space. We have all these programs that say, I'm a corporation that believes I want to invest in improvements in climate related to agriculture. And great, we've got these carbon offset frameworks. Let's apply them to insets. We got all the rules kind of written there. We got rules to reference, and great, we're going to work on this acre, and we're going to find a way to pay a farmer to put more soil in that acre. Well, that's really hard to measure. We should measure that. Cool. Now we're measuring that. Now we're all debating what the right way to measure that is, what the right way to transact that is. So now we've got multiple protocols to do this one very, very narrow thing that is great and powerful, and I'm all for it, yes. But you just went from broad-based problem from a corporate to very narrow solve that actually creates friction for the farmer, especially if they're not getting paid enough. Costs them money, somebody's checking their soil, they need to learn this new business. Creates friction for everybody around them because now they're probably making their agronomists put the data in the computer. Let's be honest, the farmer's not usually sitting down and put that in. So now you're putting work on them. They're not going for what? Because some corporation wants to make some claim and because some auditor says that we need to do this right way. And now we're taking a soil sample, but that soil sample doesn't help me manage fertility. It's just telling me how much carbon's in there, which before yesterday I didn't care.
Right.
Organic matter, sure, maybe, but I don't need soil organic carbon samples for that. So we built all this infrastructure around solving this problem in this really narrow way. And then because it's largely driven by a lot of the more domain and technical minds, you stay in your lane and nobody's porpoising and going, what are we doing? Like, is this even making sense? Because you step back and you go, here are these arguments about how regenerative agriculture is so great because it's more efficient, it's more climate resilient, it is all of these wonderful things. It can be more productive, or at least more productive per dollar per unit of input. So we all want to kind of drive the right thing, but because we got so stuck in the weeds of the specifics of it, you don't step back and go, well, let's see, give me the ag supply chain. What if we had a transaction mechanism moving from what we call, insets like tonnage and carbon credits like we talked about in the last episode to like, well, there's some native truth here that is, there were some inputs that went into that acre.
Yep.
Somebody made those inputs. There was some amount of resources used to make those inputs. So that's part of it. Things happen on the acre. Carbon goes in, carbon goes out, nitrous oxide goes out, nitrogen into waterways, whatever. And then they're selling that grain to somebody in the middle that gets processed, and it goes to a CPG, then it goes into a retail establishment, into a consumer, right? Cool. Well, consumers kind of want this, but they don't really pay for it. CPGs are the only ones that really seem to be paying for it, and they're just trying to do it straight to the farmer because they don't know how to work through this messy, untraceable value chain in large-scale commodities. And everybody's just kind of ignoring inputs except like, oh, fertilizer and petroleum is bad, and they're using a lot of energy, and blah, blah, blah. So they face this generalized pressure. When you step back and you go, what do we want? We want efficient production. When do we want it? Now. Sorry. But like we want efficient production, and guess what? Efficient production translates into profitability.
Yep.
Who likes profitability? Everybody along that whole chain, right? Except the people that are selling, inputs that want you to put more on. And nothing against input companies. That's the business, right? What do you do? I sell a thing. What do I want to do? Sell more of it. Yeah. But those companies are now starting to face pressure and incentive. So there's a carrot and a stick at the right places in the value chain. So we talk about governmental direction or whatever, but we've got things like you go all the way back to fertilizer production, and there is pressure on that side of things. And they know that they face pressure downstream, that like this whole like over fertilization thing, like that's well known that that's a good insurance policy, and they're facing that pressure to produce fertilizer in a more environmentally efficient or friendly way. And they're facing pressure that they think they're probably going to see declining volumes. Maybe that's offset by the degradation of the soil. We can debate that. But with advances in other products that are making fertilizer use more efficient, yada, yada. But you have this incentive over here. And it's like, okay, what if we can innovate in the type of fertilizer that we sell? Can it be more efficient, more stable, enhanced efficiency fertilizers? Can we pair something that's well established, like a renewable energy certificate, where you say, okay, this fertilizer, instead of being produced with, coal-fired energy or something like that, it was produced with green energy. And now one of the biggest sources of emissions in fertilizer production, energy use, is now taken away, blue ammonia, right? So now you go all the way back to the top of the chain. These folks can get potentially tax incentives, and then can get paid by down the chain for reducing the emissions with source of fertilizer. So there you go. Maybe net neutral, maybe even a good forward-thinking resilience move for those big fertilizer producers. The same exact thing lies behind why oil companies are the biggest investors in renewable energy. Same thing. You're just hedging. Hedging for a fairly obvious future. So you start there. Enhanced efficiency fertilizer. What does that do for the farm? enhances efficiency. Cool. All right. So I just bought less to hopefully get the same crop. And what if I do precision fertilizer application? Maybe I use a little bit less fertilizer, and that's kind of a headache. Maybe it costs a little bit of money. But if I got a market incentive coming from a CPG that says, I don't care how you get more efficient, but I will reward improved efficiency from an environmental metric, a CI score, regenerative ag credit concept, right? To pull that rec concept or something like that through. And now you say, okay, now we've got an entire value chain that wins on system efficiency. And a lot of that can happen at the farm. We just don't have the easy to understand clear mechanisms at the farm level. And that's like a technology feedback loop. That's all getting a lot better. But it's also like we need to send a consistent, easy to understand incentive signal that can make its way all the way back up the chain.
Yep.
And right now we're just doing it in these really little, projects that are well-intentioned, but they intentionally draw boundaries around themselves. And then everyone's a little bit different, and it's like project program rich and system poor. And there are plenty of good reasons that nobody's come around building the system, because there are a lot of great people who've written some really, extensive rules on the right and the wrong way to account for this stuff. And nobody's being held accountable for how that creates a massive amount of inertia and confusion in the market. But back to the whole point of like incentives and actors, like, yeah, if I'm a corporate actor and I say, okay, Nick, what you're saying makes sense, and sure, like, write the protocol, show me the technology, show me the science, whatever. But if the people who are writing the rules on how I'm supposed to account for my emissions haven't bought into this, and none of my peer group companies are doing it, the reward is kinda, and the risk feels fairly high. So then that becomes the other translating problem is you don't just have to translate to one person, you might have to translate to multiple different ones at the same time, and they all have slightly different takes on why it'll be hard or why they're scared to do it.
Right.
So I don't know if that's too far afield or if that's kind of getting at what you're getting
I
at,
think
but like that's a future that is real. It's today, and it just is kind of a momentum and a stakeholder gathering problem almost more than it is anything to do with the hard physical challenges.